Welcome to Fulcrum video 3. This video is going to show you how to use the Fulcrum. Please make sure you have watched the previous two videos before going through this tutorial. The first two videos cover the unboxing and first time setup. In this video we're going to cover initial software configuration, the different measurement modes on the Fulcrum, how to select features, and also how to measure and dimension features. So let's dive in. The first thing I want to cover is just the initial software configuration. This is mainly to familiarize yourself with how the Aberlink software is laid out and how it works. So we have all our function icons along the top bar. I'll cover the different icons and what they do throughout the video series. We have a measurement window, so this is the white screen which you see here. This is where all our measurements go as a graphical representation of each feature. And the box over by the right hand side is the feature window. For example, if a feature is open or selected, the data for it will show in this right hand window. Each view can be manipulated. We can only see one view at a time, but we can manipulate it just by right clicking into space. This gives us a quick access bar and we can switch between the views. So we have XY currently, we can change to XZ, YZ, and even isometric. You'll also see each view has its own dimensions attached to it, so they fix with each view. We also have the ability before or during measurement to right click and switch units. So whether you're working in metric or imperial, it doesn't matter. You can easily switch and convert just by right clicking and selecting switch units. So right click, you can select your view, or you can select to switch units. Rolling in and out with the mouse zooms in and out. It zooms in and out to wherever the mouse center is, so just be wary of that. And if you ever find yourself in trouble zoomed in too far, like so, right click and redraw brings everything back into scale. The next thing is the toolbars. So we have create a new inspection, open an inspection file, save the inspection file. We can switch between measurement modes via this icon here. I'll cover this later in the video. We have feature predict. Again, I'll cover this later on. Switching the probe on and off. We then in this section have our measurement features. As standard, it's got the standard plane, line, circle and point, but you can see 3D features. You already see the cylinder here. You can see the remaining 3D features by clicking on this little arrow, and it expands out to include the cone, sphere, surface and curve. Finally, we have the retake button. That's used if we take a bad point. Again, we'll cover this later on. Auto dimension, so anything we measure, if this is switched on like so, it will automatically create a dimension after everything is measured. And then finally we have run reports, which we'll run at the end of an inspection, or program playback. It is worth noting some icons are fixed to certain measurement modes. So for example, in touch mode we can run a program back, but we can't do it when we switch to scanning. Playback mode is not available. You'll also notice there's a new feature available when we are in scanning mode. This is magic curve, and again I'll cover this later in the video, but just be wary, the toolbar will change slightly depending on which measurement mode we are in. Finally, the last thing you'll want to know before diving in and getting some measurements, if you go to settings in the top right hand corner, you can go to display, and here is where you can change a lot of user settings for the display on the screen. Typical examples are the font size, the size of points when they display on the screen, and also whether you want grid lines. So for example, if I set this to 20, apply and tick, you'll see we now have grid lines as a reference on the screen. Some people prefer these, some people don't. I typically don't like to use it, so I'm going to switch it off, but it's there in case you ever need to change it. So that is a general overview of the initial software setup. So let's move on to measurement modes. touch mode works by seating the stylus against the surface in which you want to measure. The point is then registered when the stylus lifts away from the surface. So initial contact, stabilization and lift. If this process is successful, the software will register a good point. This will sound like this. So if you hear that noise, it indicates a good point. However, during this phase, if there's too much vibration at the end of the stylus, so too much shaking, or too much of a slide during the initial contact, or if the process is done too quickly, the point will be rejected. The software will generate this noise. So this noise indicates a point being rejected. It's not a problem if this happens, you simply need to take the point again. To minimize the amount of rejected points, you can often stabilize the quill of the fulcrum with your spare hand, simply by using a finger on the quill itself or on the ruby ball. And also, if you are on a workbench, you can rest both elbows against the workbench to help stabilize both hands during operation. It again is personal preference, but generally with new users, stabilizing the quill with both hands helps minimize the amount of rejected points. So let's just have a go at taking some points on the top face and on the bow. So again, I'm just going to stabilize the quill here, and the key is getting a good contact point, making sure the probe is stable before lifting away. So I'm not necessarily going to just go straight with tap and go. So let's have a go at taking 4 points. So there is 4 accepted points. However, if I shake too much, you hear the odd bleeping noise, sometimes no noise at all. So making sure you're stable really helps minimize the rejection of points. It's the same for measuring circles, so if we drive in, we're just going to tap and go. And again, if you hear the rejection point noise, it's not a problem, you simply continue measuring again until you get a good point. So that is touch mode. Scanning mode allows the stylus to remain in constant contact with the surface in which you want to measure, and the software logs points continuously as it moves. The scan is initiated via the initial contact point. You then continually move the stylus on the surface that you want to measure, and the scan is completed with a pause at the end. You can then remove the stylus and all of the points are written into the feature. So let's have a look at doing that now in the software. So before we take any measurements, we need to make sure we are in scan mode. So click on the measurement mode icon. This will switch from the current touch mode to scan mode, indicated by the S. We need to take points with the probe, so enable the probe here. And I'm going to do a plane in this example. Now again, it's the initial touch point starts the scan. You then move the stylus around on the surface. The points will be automatically registered as you see within the feature itself. And a pause at the end will accept the feature. So that is how scan mode works. Just to repeat it one more time on a circle. Again, you open the feature, the initial touch starts the scan, we remain in constant contact throughout, and when we're finished we stop with a pause and the software writes it to the screen. So that is scan mode. If you are using a star probe, the process for taking the points is exactly the same. You still have the option for scan mode or touch mode. The only difference is the graphic up on the top of the toolbar here, indicating which star you are using. Left click on the ball, indicating that that offset is now active. It shows as green in the software. That means the points are being registered with that offset. So for example, if I want to measure a plane and a circle on this side face with the X minus offset, I will left click on it so it goes green. And if I wanted to go touch mode, I can say plane, like so. Select a circle. And the results can be viewed in the standard software. If I change it to YZ, we have the plane and circle like so. It's worth noting, in touch mode you can use multiple stars within the same measurement. So just as a final example, if I start a new inspection, I can actually measure the entire tube here with the star probe using two different offsets. So again, touch mode, start, making sure you have the correct star you are going to measure with active, i.e. green. I'll then open a cylinder. And whilst leaving the feature open, I can switch over to the X positive and continue the measurement over the other side, like so. So that is how you change offset and measure with the star probe. I've briefly covered it earlier in the video, but it is worth noting and highlighting the enable probe icon at the top of the toolbar. If you are finished measuring with the Fulcrum, it's always a good idea to switch the probe off. This means no phantom or ghost points during the initial movement of the machine, and saves a lot of hassle with rogue points being added to features during programming. So make sure when you are finished measuring to switch the probe off via the enable disable probe icon. Now going to cover feature selection. So there are various different methods for selecting features within the software. As you've seen earlier, we can use the simple method of left clicking on the measurement icon at the top toolbar. For example, say I want to measure a cylinder, I simply click on the cylinder icon. The cylinder is now pre-selected, so any points that I take on the part get fed directly into the feature window. This is the most simple option for feature selection. However, a faster, slicker method is to use the feature predict icon. This is the top hat that you see next to the enable probe icon. And if you click on this, you'll see it highlights orange. That means that it is switched on. The idea being that now I don't actually need to select any features. The software will automatically predict which features I'm trying to measure. It is worth noting, it does only work for planes, circles and lines, but as you'll see in this demo, it is very, very handy if measuring those features in a standard program. So I don't use the mouse at all here, I simply go in and you'll see it automatically predicts a plane. If I still don't touch the mouse here, but I continue to measure, so I'll do the circle, the software automatically OKs the plane and logs the points for the new feature, i.e. the circle. And then say I want a line across the front face. Again, you'll see it automatically jumps and measures the line. If I hit the green tick on this, you'll see it's written those features directly into the software, which we can then dimension and report. So the second option for feature selection is to use the feature predict. Again, it's this top hat icon, but it is worth noting it only works for planes, circles and lines. Any other features, mainly the 3D features, will require the mouse to be selected. To make feature selection even faster and easier for the operator, we have these magnetic feature buttons, sometimes referred to as granite buttons. The idea is we create a sticker, so these are supplied with the machine, but you can make your own in your own color scheme, your own size, whatever you want. And the idea is we map this cubic volume within the bed of the machine to a feature on the toolbar, so that when the Ruby ball hovers above this cube or enters this cubic volume, it pre-selects the button on the toolbar. So let's start with a simple one. We'll use the plane. Generally speaking, it's always a good idea to have these set up on the edge of the volume so that they don't interfere with the measurement of components. So let's have a little look at how we set this up in the software. Generally a good idea to have the probe switched off when setting these magnetic buttons, just so that the probe doesn't interfere with any setting of the points. So make sure the probe is switched off, and in this example we are going to teach the plane button. So we right click on the plane measure icon and then we select teach granite button. So when we select that, it's now looking for 3 pause points in the corners of the magnetic button. So let's have a look at how we would set that. So again, we're here. The easiest option is to go top left hand corner, bottom left hand corner, bottom right hand corner, but it is personal preference and the order doesn't actually matter. So touch and pause, wait for the beep, then move on again, and there we go. We have now taught the 3 points of where this corner system is for the plane icon. And if we look in the software now, you'll see we have written the granite button for the plane feature into the software. Now we are looking currently in the XY view, but if I right click and set it to isometric, you'll see what I mean in the fact that this is now a cubic volume. So now whenever I move the probe into this volume, it pre-selects the feature. Okay, so just to see that in action on the camera, so whenever I'm entering that volume with the probe, so I don't actually need to touch it, I just need to hover above it and it will pre-select that feature. So just to go through this one more time, let's set up, for example, the line. So again, we go into the standard software, we right click on the line icon from the toolbar, then left click on the teach granite button option. We then use the probe, sit it in the top left hand corner, wait for the beep, bottom left hand corner, wait for the beep, bottom right hand corner, wait for the beep. That then writes the feature box for the line. You can do this for any of the icons that are supplied with the machine, and if there's any icons you want to add, you can simply create your own sticker, seat it wherever you want, and map out the cubic volume via the 3 points. If you do ever wish to clear a volume, you can do so by right clicking on the icon again, and you'll see the option now is clear because it is already set. So if I left click on clear, you'll see it clears the granite button, so there's no longer a link to the button on the bed. So those are the magnetic feature buttons. We are now going to look at getting some basic measurements, the goal being to show you how to create dimensions and also tolerance the dimensions. In this example, we're going to measure a plane on the top face, a circle on the center bore, and a line along the left edge. Because the circle and line are 2D features, we have to make sure that we measure the plane first, as they require a projection plane being 2D. I'm going to pre-select the feature predict icon via the magnetic button on the bed. This is going to make the feature selection even easier. And in this example, I'm going to leave auto dimension off. I can cover this later in the video. So we are now ready to get some measurements. Let's go in and start taking points on the plane. And there we go, there's the plane. We'll now do the circle. There we go, and now the line. And there we go. With this being the last feature, I'm going to switch the probe off, and I'm also going to hit the green tick on the line to accept it. This will now write the features into the software. So if I switch the camera off, you can see the features on the screen as graphical representations. To create dimensions in Aberlink 3D, it takes 2 left clicks. So if it's a single feature like this circle, we'll click on the edge twice. 1, 2. This starts the dimension. It now follows my mouse, so you can see wherever I move the mouse it follows, and a 3rd left click will drop it down on the screen. If I need to reposition this, it's a simple case of left click and drag, and it will move to wherever I let go. If I want to give this a name, a tolerance band and a nominal, I can right click on it. The dimension box then opens up. This is where I can give it a name, for example, center bore diameter, a nominal, which you would get from the drawing, the same with tolerance bands, so relative or absolute, depending on the print. We also even have a drop-down box for preset fits, which will apply the correct tolerance band. If a feature has a geometric callout attached to it, so for example, this is a circle, so the geometric callout for a circle is roundness. Aberlink automatically applies it. All you need to do is define the limit in the limit box here. Once you are happy, apply the changes and hit the green tick, and you'll see it updates on the screen. If you want a dimension between 2 features, it is a single click on each feature. So for example, I want the distance from this circle to this line. It's 1 click on each, so 1 and 1. That's the 2 clicks for the pre-selection. I move it wherever I want, the 3rd left click dropping it down on the screen. Now again, I can right click on it to open the dimension window, give it a name via the identifier box, so distance to side face. Give it a nominal, so that again you'll get this from the print. Let's say it was supposed to be 28.5. Fill your tolerance band in, so let's say it's plus 0.05 minus nothing. Hit the green tick, and you'll see it updates on the screen. Because it's outside of tolerance, it flags up red. And that is how we create basic dimensions and tolerance them in Aberlink 3D. If you want to save time on dimension creation, there is the option to switch on auto dimension. That is this icon here. So when you left click on it, it highlights orange to indicate that it's switched on. This will automatically apply any dimensions from features that are written into the software. So let's switch to scanning mode just to show you this in action. So I'll select plane, we'll then touch and scan to get the plane measured initially. The pause stops the measurement. We'll then go circle, tap and scan, and you'll see automatically it's created the dimension itself. If I continue, so again, line, touch and scan, then line, touch and scan. Once the second line is measured, it's automatically applied the distance measurement. So as you can see, it's a useful tool that will allow you to automatically dimension anything that is measured. So that's auto dimension. Magic Curve is a feature only available in scan mode, but the idea is it allows you to scan slots and pockets, and it will automatically construct all the features that are measured within that data set. Combined with auto dimension, it makes the measurement and dimensioning of slots and pockets very fast and easy. So let's have a go at switching it on. I'm going to use the magnetic button here, and what we can do is simply touch, start the scan around the pocket. Make sure you don't go too fast on here to allow the software to pick up all the data. And there we go. You'll see automatically at the end of the scan, we have all the individual features, and because auto dimension is switched on, it's applied a bunch of dimensions automatically. It won't create every single possible dimension, so you can continue to go around creating any other dimensions that you need, just as before in the earlier exercise. So that is Magic Curve. As a final note on dimension creation, there are some dimensions in which you will need to align. So for example, if I go from this circle to this circle, the standard dimension it gives me is a 3D aligned size. It might be that this is what you're after, but in most cases you will want this to be an aligned dimension. You can move it into the section in which you want, but without a reference system, it really needs to be an aligned or an anti-aligned dimension to another feature. We can do this by right-clicking before we drop the dimension down on the screen. This gives us a list of alignment options, and in this particular case I would say aligned to feature and select a face. You can see that is now aligned to the left hand face, and if I create the same dimension again by clicking on the two circles, right click, anti-align to feature, clicking the left hand face, you'll see it aligns the X and Y offsets for these two radiuses through this face. The same applies to any true position callouts or any advanced dimension callouts. You create the dimension with 2 clicks, you then right click for options, and you see you have extra options here. This is where you can call out true position, but you can also do things like datum creation.